Hey everybody, welcome back to NickyT.live. I'm your host Nick Taylor, and today I'm hanging out with Anthony Alaribe. Anthony, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good.
Uh,
Thanks for having me here today, Nick.
oh yeah, no problem at all. Sorry if I looked a little flustered there when we started. I use OBS to live stream, and I just checked the screen and it said, "Do you want to update now?" And I definitely did not want to, and I was like, please make sure I click the right button to say rewind later." So I got a little sidetracked there. But anyways, for folks who might not know who you are, Anthony, would you mind just kind of, I guess, giving a bit of a TLDR of who Anthony, the legend, the man, the myth is, and then we can get started and go from there.
So I think I said my name is Anthony. So I'm a developer who likes to build things. I've been a programmer for closer to 12 years, just
Okay.
in industry doing mostly web stuff. I worked at Delivery Hero for a bit.
Oh,
I
cool.
did work with some digital banks. I worked with a company called Opera, the browser company at some
Oh no
point,
way, you worked at Opera. That's awesome. That's super
and,
cool.
uh, and
Okay.
yeah, but yeah, I'm just a developer, and now I'm building an API toolkit, which is an attempt at solving some problems that cost Delivery Hero, I think, almost more than $2
Okay.
million. But yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I dropped a link to API Toolkit for people that are interested. That's pretty much. I mean, we're gonna talk about. We always go on tangents on the live stream, so I'm sure we'll talk about other stuff too. But for for those who aren't aware of API Toolkit, could you kind of give a, I guess, a high level of like why would somebody look for a tool like API Toolkit or a piece of software like API Toolkit?
So there are many ways I could, talk about it. I could take it talk about it from the angle of why I even built it, right?
Okay, yeah,
So I built it mainly because um, observability is very popular in the industry, and I've been a user of all the big names. But if you look at the things that make companies lose a lot of money,
yeah,
there's the huge downtimes where your systems are completely down, nothing's working.
hmm,
But there's also the little issues like uh, the intern updated or pushed the PR and updated some field, and now
okay,
that field is empty or that field is wrong. Maybe you have some JSON value that used to return numbers and now it's returning a string. That's a
okay, yeah,
problem. That's a bug. Or maybe it used to return a date and now
okay.
it's returning a Unix timestamp. So I found that most observability tools were kind of optimized for catching the big downtime, the
Yeah.
really big issues, but nothing was really optimized for catching the bugs. The bugs that make developers spend 2 weeks, trying
Hmm.
banging their head on why something is not working exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
it's that kind of tool.
Okay. Cool. And I guess just to be kind of uh, just curious, like you said, why even build this? Um, there's a lot of observability tooling out there and platforms. I'm assuming you built this after looking at some of those things, but like for the specific things you needed, those just weren't available, or are these weren't features in those platforms, or
So in 2019, I was responsible for a rewrite. So we had this like
okay,
legacy system that we were writing from PHP to Go, and we had like very well instrumented. We had Datadog and New Relic. We're using both at the time
okay,
with tracing and all the Delivery Hero tries to be very observability heavy. They try to be very careful with these things. But
okay,
when we did this entire rewrite, this migration and rolled it out in production, we had we didn't have a downtime. The system was working perfect, at least from the perspective of the observability tool. So we had all the 200 requests with 200. There
okay,
were no errors being logged, but then the apps were crashing and we lost a lot of money.
Okay.
and it was crashing just because of the data just being different in some scenarios than what it should have been, right?
Oh, okay. Okay. I
So
see.
yeah, so I had to do this retrospective with my team, like, okay, how could we have caught this issue? And
Okay.
we found that there's really not no popular way actually, or no, there was nothing that we could find that could have caught this kind of breaking changes or this kind of
Okay.
bugs. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I know there's Swagger slash I think it's called it's Open API. I always have trouble saying Open API now.
Open API
Um,
specs, yeah.
yeah, which I know a lot of APIs use. We use it at open source as well, and it it generates your documentation, but you can also like I know I do a lot of TypeScript, so like I know there's a lot of tooling around like stuff like strongly typed APIs now. Um, but that's like a way to fix those things, but it's not the same thing as like you catching the errors, I guess.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's a way to prevent a lot of that, but it's not again, it's not the actual observability part. This is like an implementation part of those APIs.
I mean, it's a big part of the solution as well, right? So if you're
Yeah.
very meticulous, like if you're very careful as a developer and you have this system that you want to monitor, that you want to track, you can manually just dump all the requests that are coming in and out of your servers and
Yeah.
validate it against the specification,
Yeah.
right? So now the devil is in the details. How detailed is that specification? Do you
Okay. Yeah.
actually like specify all the fields? If you have a name field, do you tell the specification what a name should look like? If you have a date field or a timestamp field, do you in your specification say that a time that the date is maybe month, year, day, or something? Are you like that detailed? And
Okay.
in reality, most of us are not that detailed.
Okay.
Actually, most
So
things just generate the Open API Swagger from their code, which yeah, it's not
okay.
that detailed. Yeah.
Yeah. I got you. So like obviously you can like you said you can be a very meticulous developer that's making sure okay everything's TypeScript, everything's strongly typed, but obviously things can still go wrong. So
Mhm.
again, the observability part is where this comes in, and so um, cool. So
So
I
I
guess
mean, you can be like, maybe like unique. Maybe you write perfect code on first try.
I I
You
do not
just
write perfect code.
you don't you don't run the test. You just deploy to production. You don't try it out locally. Maybe, but
Yeah,
like for the rest of us mortals, we just need things to help us know we're doing something right.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, right before this live stream, I was pairing with my coworker John on a bug I introduced in our CLI. So no, I 100% do not write perfect code. just
Did,
just
did,
putting
did
that
you
out there.
just blame? Did you just blame and see yourself? Like, who did this?
Well,
Nick.
well, well, I didn't have to get blame. It was more, I mean, it was just a certain set of circumstances, but also it was the code I wrote, but the errors
Mm,
weren't showing up, so I have to update the test now too. But we also just tested the different paths of how like it came to this. So
mm.
no, it was super helpful actually because I just literally started using Go writing Go last week. So
Oh,
like
congrats.
I did about 3 days of Go last week. Shipped a shipped a couple things. Wrote some tests too, so felt good about that. But literally today and yesterday, that's so I guess I'm on day 5 of writing Go. So I feel pretty good having shipped stuff to production. But yeah, just learning as I go. No pun intended.
It's cool,
But
right? You could
yeah, no, I
push
like it.
stuff to production in 5 days.
Yeah, no, I feel pretty good about it. Like obviously that bug's not good, but it's a new feature we're rolling out, so it's not a lot of. It's really more us using it, and I
Mm,
discovered the issue because we were using the CLI to generate some stuff in a GitHub action in our own repositories right now. So like to kind of dog food it. So I'm glad like the error happened before like it really gets more mass adoption. So all in
Yeah.
all, it was just a great learning experience because like digging into some Go code and just some stuff
Wh-
that I missed, and so like I'm
Which
sure I'll
which
improve.
ecosystems did you come from, like programming languages?
Yeah, the start of my career, like the majority of my career was in .NET, so C Sharp,
Mm,
ASP.NET, Web Forms, ASP.NET MVC, and then in 2016 I moved to, because at the time, just to give context, like Microsoft wasn't really open source in terms of stuff, so like C Sharp and like .NET's all
yeah.
open now, but it wasn't at the time. And I was really interested in open source, and I always liked JavaScript. We'd started using TypeScript really early on, so like I started using TypeScript in 2015. So
Oh, okay. Oh
uh,
wow, that's early.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, no, super early.
mm,
Same with React. I started using React in like 2015 and some open source stuff,
mm.
or early 2016. Um, but yeah, I moved more to full stack Node, JavaScript, TypeScript stuff, just because it was in the open source, and that's kind of where I've been mainly since then. But no, I'm excited to jump into
On
the
the
land of
yeah,
Go.
on the TypeScript side, I was gonna try to paint a parallel between, like, open API schemas and like not using types, but you've been like using types since 2015.
Oh no, but it's okay. Like I mean, there's still a lot of people new to TypeScript, so like definitely mention the parallels and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like the whole idea of having types, right? From whether it's from .NET or TypeScript, is that if you have a struct, a record, whatever
Yeah,
you call it, a type that says name should be a string, and then all of a sudden someone changes name to a number, right?
yeah,
The compiler will tell you all of the parts of your code where you're performing string operations on name, and said, okay,
yeah,
maybe you should
exactly. Yeah,
do something.
yeah,
So I guess it's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing, but just on a communications level, on an API level.
yeah. It's interesting seeing people use TypeScript when they've never used a type language. Like TypeScript's a little different because it's like it's a superset of JavaScript, and it accommodates like the peculiarities of JavaScript,
Yeah.
but it's still like there's a build step obviously and stuff, and
Do
it's
you do you miss that flexibility in Go? So I wrote
uh
I've been doing Go since 2013, uh,
okay.
thereabouts. So I used to, so I'm very passionate about Go, but at the same time, I also find myself missing a lot of those things. So I like to
Yeah,
ask other people.
I don't think it's a point of friction because I, having worked in like C sharp before, and
Mm,
like I was used to a type system already, like so like even moving to TypeScript from C sharp, like a lot of people struggle with like generics and stuff, but these things all
mhm.
existed in C sharp prior to
Yes.
TypeScript. So like when I saw generics in TypeScript, I knew exactly what was going on. Like the the syntax is pretty almost identical to C sharp, I think. But so like that, that made that transition easier. But I actually like that learning a new language, the types are telling you no, you're wrong, because it actually helps
Yes.
with the learning process, I think. But
Mm,
again, I think it depends, like because I've been programming for a long time now, so I find it helpful. But I can also see how somebody brand new to programming, or maybe like, although I've heard Go is pretty approachable, which I think it is, but like I
I
can
mean, you deployed in
understand,
5 days, so.
like I can understand how a language with a type system, or a language that's not a dynamic language, I could understand how somebody new would get frustrated pretty easily. Like, because people even get frustrated with TypeScript when they don't understand the types, and that people just say like put any or whatever, because it just
Mm.
fixes it. Um, so I think it's just I could see the frustration early on, but even even so though, I think it's good to see like, well, no, this won't work because you're passing a number to this function and it's expecting a string. Like obviously you could say like to string the number and stuff, but like I'm getting in the
Yes.
weeds there. But I think the type system is helpful in the sense that it'll guide you. You know,
Yes.
um, but
Exactly.
and I definitely think TypeScript's great in the front end ecosystem. I know
So
there's people that don't really like it still, but I don't know. I think most projects nowadays are almost always using it, especially library authors. So, but I'm curious about
I
your
mean,
thoughts
people
though.
are gonna hate. People are gonna hate anything you bring. So, in the another thing I'm really interested in is the functional programming world, like Haskell,
Okay, yeah.
and they have this thing called dependent types.
Okay,
And the whole idea is that normally you would have a type that says, um, let's say you have a type age, but
okay,
there's a particular range that is of what is a valid age. So an age could be, or maybe you're building a social media app and the only allowed age is between 13 and maybe 100, maybe 150, but 1000 is probably not a very valid age.
okay.
So usually you would write this as validation code in like most languages,
Hmm.
but in like dependently typed languages you can it would be a function of the type. So you would literally just have a type age,
Yeah.
which for all intents and purposes is a number, but it's a number that only holds value 13 to, let's say, 100, right?
Oh, okay. That's
so
interesting.
so I find this very interesting, and it's something I like about TypeScript. As much as people say TypeScript types are not like they're not complete because you can have all those holes. The
Yeah.
nature of where TypeScript came from, the nature of its JavaScript background means that you can encode these same concepts like this. You can actually create a type that only holds the number 13 to 100 in TypeScript.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't do
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
in Go. You can't do that.
Okay.
I don't think you can do that in .NET, right? In C Sharp.
Yeah.
But I think it's what I
Yeah.
imagine that that the future of types should be, that we don't need to have all of this validation. And when I'm
Hmm.
building API toolkit, it's what I also try to do, that when we
Okay.
analyze an API and we see a field, so we figure that this field is a string, but
Yeah.
can we take it a step further? Can we find that range, for example? So if it's a number, if it's an age field, can we find what that range is? If it's
Yeah.
a string, what kind of string? Is it a UUID? Is it
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
just alphanumeric? Is even though it's a string, is it just numeric? Just finding
Yeah.
out those details of the type, so it's more, you can catch more issues.
Yeah. No, for sure. And it's like, um, yeah, no, in the type system in TypeScript, you can definitely do that stuff. Like with union types, like you could literally just say
Yeah.
one or two or three, and that's all it can be. And like, so like, yeah, as long as you're doing the build step in TypeScript, it'll definitely fail. Um, and I do find it interesting because there's like like you can have they have enums in TypeScript, but typically it was kind of a mistake that they introduced at the beginning. But
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
but it's kind of interesting where you
It
can
could have
like
been better.
yeah, but it's interesting where you can basically say like, for example, like because I do a lot of front end at open source as well, and so say like we have a button and it's a variant, so like it could be the primary or the secondary. You can set that
Mhm.
variant prop in the React component to say it's a union type of only like primary, secondary, and like whatever else you want to say. So the classic like typo errors, like if I wrote primary instead of primary, that the build is going to catch that, whereas if it
You
was
catch
just
it.
a string, so like the whole concept of like narrowing the type is I think pretty solid. Yeah, I mean I like TypeScript, so like I'm biased obviously, but
I
the other
like
thing,
it.
yeah.
I just have my reservations. This whole thing about it not being having, or the whole thing of having too many escape hatches
Yeah.
is what makes me not as happy.
Yeah, like I mean, there's stuff. I mean, you can do this in C sharp too. You can say cast something to a, like this, say some number equals, and you can say I'm just gonna cast it to this other thing, and you can cast in
Mm,
TypeScript as well, which is basically removing the safety hatches of the type system.
with the
I
types,
mean,
yes.
obviously, if you're doing something like that, you typically know what you're doing, but it does,
Hopefully.
yeah, but it makes the type system unsound. And it was interesting. I did a live stream with Dylan Mulroy, who works over at Vercel, and he's really big into type systems and functional programming, and really great conversation. If
Yes, I
you
love
want to
Dylan.
check that one out, he knows his stuff when it comes to types and
Oh,
functional
definitely.
programming stuff.
I come across him when we are having the Haskell, mini Haskell conversations.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no. But there's definitely stuff I like about, like, I've seen it in Rust. I think I'm not sure if, like, from the Go I saw, I think it's kind of similar, but like you have the options, so you have like the value, but also like the error, and then you can do the I like you can do the pattern matching and stuff. There's like stuff that's not
That
in
is
JavaScript and TypeScript yet, but
fantastic. That is what I miss specifically. So I think, like when you said that TypeScript enums could be
mhm.
better. That's just what I was thinking. That instead of enums, we could have had this proper entities, this abstract. What are entities again? Abstract data types.
Yeah,
Basically, you could have like a data type that is this or this or this, and then you can have a value, and that is
yeah,
basically what Rust error types are, or Rust results
yeah,
types are. That it's an enum that could be either an okay or an error,
yeah,
and if
and
it's
yeah,
okay, it has a value.
yeah,
But you
and you
can't
and
do
you were
that in
saying,
Rust.
yeah, and you were saying,
In
sorry, I was gonna say you were mentioning you caught the live stream about Effect TS, and they get a lot of inspiration from Rust to do that as well, and it's an interesting thing because for like C sharp or like JavaScript or TypeScript, you're used to, errors happening and then throwing them, and that concept kind of doesn't really exist when you use that pattern. It's like there's still errors obviously, but it's just handled differently, and it's just a different way to think. It's like, what do you mean I'm not throwing the error here? You're just okay, you're just returning it, and then it's more like you adjust the code to the, like, because like even when you throw an error, like there's errors where you expect them, like maybe maybe you have to retry a network request like 3 times, for example. If that fails, it's a potentially expected error. But like something else where like you just can't recover, that's where you have to go into panic mode or say stop, you know so it's like it's just interesting how they deal with that in Rust and other, I'm not super well versed in Rust. I've done a bit, but more just like
I mean,
tutorials and stuff. But
I think there's so in Rust you have this thing where you can put a question mark at the end of a line that returns an error, and I like
yeah.
to think of it as a throw, just a special kind of throwing.
Yeah.
Where I think Rust is different from most languages is that the error which you're throwing is not it's it's um it's not magical, so it has to be part of the
Hmm.
types. So
Yeah.
the function where you're throwing that error needs to explicitly say that it returns a result, which means one of the possible responses could be that
Yeah.
error that would get thrown. So I think that's the main difference. So they could easily have replaced the question mark with the keyword through
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe catch somewhere, but having it in the types is what makes it special, I think.
Yeah. And it's really interesting in Rust. From the bit of Rust I've done, is like it just won't compile if you don't have, like, I mean, any
Yeah.
type language won't compile if you have errors, but like the error system in Rust is pretty solid, and like even when you do get an error, it almost reads like English, like, oh, okay, like you can't do this because of XYZ, and I found that
Yeah.
refreshing, and I know a lot of people, I've heard speak of about Rust. That's something they typically mention, and it's like, but again, I've only really done stuff like Rustlings and like read some books and stuff. I haven't
Yeah.
done production Rust code. So maybe my tune
When
will
you were
change,
doing
but
when you were doing like more C sharp stuff, did you ever try F sharp?
uh, F sharp came out kind of near when I was about getting closer to stopping doing C sharp, but
Okay.
F sharp is definitely interesting. My old coworker Michael from when I worked at Dev2 is a big fan of it. And yeah, the whole interesting thing about, because it's a functional programming language, like as you know, is like the immutable data types. And I think that's another thing that throws people off too, is if you've never worked with immutable stuff, it's like, why can't I
Yeah.
just change this thing? Like even Rust does this. You have to
Yeah.
explicitly say I want to mutate it. And I
Yeah.
think that can I think if you're starting off, I think that can definitely throw you off. At least
Oh, yeah.
that's how I kind of feel about it.
Even
But
in JavaScript, there was a time when it was all the rage. We just had
yeah,
all of this immutable data store libraries, also all of the like Ramda and things like that. That was really hard for me because I think I was also fairly new to JavaScript.
yeah,
Or I wasn't, as into I wasn't in the mindset as much at the time, and it was really
okay.
hard.
Yeah, yeah, there was a whole I think it came out of the React ecosystem, but immutable JS, and like
Yeah.
it basically I think why it didn't stay popular, or like it was popular for a brief moment, I think, is because it wasn't the actual types in JavaScript. Like it was always like a different object that you had to use.
Hmm.
You couldn't say like a new map. It was like it's an immutable map, or like a mutable list, and there was other stuff that came out that I think made it more approachable. There's something called Immer, which
Emma. Or Ember, which one?
no, no, not Ember, Immer, Immer,
Oh, I don't know
and it
that one.
was it it got again. I think this came out of the person that created MobX, Michael. I think his last name's Weststraight. He created this Immer.js, and it essentially
Okay.
uses proxies in JavaScript. So it makes it look like you can mutate data, but you're not actually mutating it, even though it looks like it. And so I think
I see.
that one's pretty interesting. I haven't really worked with it myself, but it was actually I think it was when I was I can't remember if it was when I was talking to Dylan or somebody else recently, but I was contemplating introducing it into the project for something. I can't remember what, but yeah, but lots of
Well,
great stuff though.
yeah. I don't. I mean, I use Haskell, so it's pretty much everything is immutable there. But
Yeah.
still, as much, how do I put it? Like I use it because I have to. I'm not like as sold on a lot of these benefits of immutable. I mean,
Okay.
I understand it. Like, oh, let's put it this way. I know them because everyone says it. Oh yeah, you
Yeah.
can put them on different cores. You can run this kind of stuff in parallel easily. You know what is changing what, but I don't deeply like connect with the benefit with like my
Hmm.
day-to-day life as a developer. Yeah, I use
Yeah.
it anyway since in Haskell and in Rust, it's the only way. I'm just
Yeah. No, I mean, like the immutable having stuff immutable just gives you a different set of guarantees,
yeah.
so it's pretty interesting stuff. But I haven't done any Haskell. Also, hey Fuzzy, good to see you, my man. There's Fuzzy in the chat over there, and
Hi,
also
Fuzzy.
thanks Programming Concepts for joining us over on YouTube. Um, yeah, yeah, I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot of value to the immutable stuff, but again, it's I think there's a bit of a learning curve, because like your instinct is to just say like I have the thing here, let me just change the thing.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Because even in languages like Haskell, which is immutable is the number one way to do stuff, there is still escape hatches, right? And people
Okay.
are starting to use that escape hatch. And what is most popular now in Haskell is something called linear types,
Okay.
which basically it's basically a guarantee from the compiler, from the type system, that something would only be used once. And now
Okay.
what is all the rage is that people are writing libraries that use this linear types to do basically a mutation. So to just
Okay.
mutate variables in place, so they just mutate it and wrap it around this like library. So there's some guarantees. But TLDR is that even these guys are yearning for mutation, hence why features like this are becoming popular. So yeah,
Yeah.
I guess the right tool for the right job, I guess.
Yeah, and I think for the escape hatches, you just use them, I guess, carefully.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I love this conversation. But I'm curious, just to, I have no segue, but to bring it back to API Toolkit, you were talking about like you've been doing Go for a long time. So
Mhm.
is API Toolkit written in Go, I'm assuming?
Whew, that's interesting. So the first version of API Toolkit was almost entirely written in Go,
Okay.
and I was working on. So there's a query language where you can. It's kind of like a log system, right? You can log. We are automatically logging the requests that come in and out. So if you have third-party dependencies that you're making API calls to, we also log in those requests you make to those third parties, including the requests your customers make to you. So there's a query language for querying these logs and finding what your customers are doing. And then there's a bit of logic that is automatically analyzing these logs to see when there's breaking changes and all that stuff. So when I was writing this logic, the first version was in Go, and it was so painful.
Okay.
And Go is, Go is I've used Go the longest in my entire career.
Okay.
So it's the first thing I reach out for when I'm building a lot of stuff. But at the time, I was also a bit interested in functional programming, and I was like, okay, just for fun, this problem that I've been spending the last week banging my head on, why don't I just try writing it in Haskell?
Okay.
And I wrote it in 200 lines of code, like the entire query language and a the part that catches breaking changes. So the query language was in like 130 or 150 something lines of code, and then the other one. And the Go code I had written so far, which wasn't working very well, was already like 3,000, 4,000, and I was like, ah. So I just continued writing Haskell for that bit.
Okay. Okay.
So it
Yeah. No,
was
that's
it was like it wasn't the plan, but then that part of the system ended up just being a Haskell code
okay.
base.
So not the whole system, just part of the back end.
Yeah, the query language, and yeah, but a big chunk of it is Haskell these days. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's interesting because like in 2017, I was working at an AI startup and I was doing mainly front end there, and we were basically building chatbots for Facebook Messenger, and
Hmm.
a lot of the back end for the AI and ML stuff was in Haskell. Um,
Oh,
and there was also the other name
that is
is
surprising.
escaping me. Um, it was Haskell and
Ocaml,
I can't remember the other. What's that? No,
Ocaml.
there was definitely some Python for sure. Like the researchers were using Python. Uh,
Okay, so
but
not Ocaml then.
no, not OCaml. I hadn't heard of OCaml at the time. I honestly only I heard about OCaml through the React community from like there's like a language called Reason ML
Uh,
which is based on
yeah,
OCaml.
reason.
And I
Yeah.
remember I don't know if you follow Ken Wheeler on Twitter/X, but I saw
Yeah.
him tweeting about a Reason ML a lot and just like the type safety guarantees and stuff. And so that's kind of how I first heard about OCaml. And more recently, like I was saying, when I was hanging out with Dylan on stream,
Hmm.
he's a big fan of OCaml. If you're interested in OCaml, he live streams every morning my time about I think like 8:30 a.m. So like it's either 8 or 9 a.m. Eastern. which that's like 5 hours difference for UTC. So like I don't know, like one or 2 p.m. UTC I think is when he streams. But he's a big fan of OCaml, so if that's something you're super interested in, definitely check out his stream. And yeah, and he's a good guy too. Um, but yeah, not
So did you ever play around with that ML code base, that Haskell bits at your
no, just
workplace?
it was more just because like it was a small startup, but like I actually ended up not doing that, but I was even though I was doing front end, I was deploying like the application to Kubernetes because we were just a small
Mm.
team. So not that I'm a Kubernetes expert or anything, but all I remember is like, okay, it's deployed. Oh, something's not working. Restart the pod, and that was kind of like the line that
Uh,
we were always doing. But yeah, it's bugging me what the other language was. But yeah, no, the
I'm
research
just surprised
scientists,
that someone would do ML in Haskell. Like,
or
why?
maybe it wasn't ML in Haskell. It was like we had some language, like because there was a natural language being used, and I could have sworn
Mm.
it
Yeah, I
was
think if
part of
it's
it.
natural language, Haskell is really good at. I think
Yeah,
anytime you
it
have to
was the natural
pass
language part,
something,
not the ML part. Yeah.
yeah, if you have to pass something or write a parser, there's no language on earth in my experience. So maybe there is, but in my experience, there's no language that is. It's just so good.
Yeah, no, totally. Um, cool. I could honestly keep talking about programming languages if you want, but just to just because like I know you wanted to showcase some of API Toolkit. I'm wondering like if we want to take a peek at API Toolkit, what's the best way to get started? Like I'll open up the
I
website
can show you.
here. Okay, cool.
I can
All
show.
right,
I can
I'll
actually show you like the bits that I can show you the bits that were written in the different language. I can even show you code actually. Let's see.
Okay, cool. Is it
Um,
okay if I share my screen, or did you want to share your screen? Or
I can share mine.
okay. Um, hopefully you don't have to jump off and restart your browser because I forgot to ask you to check your settings.
No,
It
no,
might, if you
I
screen
have another
share,
tab.
it should pop it.
Yes, let's try.
Yeah, it's just at the bottom there. Okay, cool. It's loading up.
Okay, it
I'm just
worked.
gonna copy the link to your screen. I'm just gonna add it into the stream. So just give me a second here. Let's go back to
Hmm.
OBS and let's do guest share. And okay, it's just gonna load up. Let me get your link. Here we go. Now it's always a bit of a surprise. It depends on the person's screen. Okay, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
resize it a bit just so we can
I
get.
can also just zoom in. Let me do it
Yeah,
like
yeah, no,
this.
no, no, yeah, yeah, that's all good. I'm just getting the most of your screen on screen here. So there we go. We're good.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So we're in. So
Okay,
I just open. We have this demo project, which is usually kind of empty. So, but it's a good
okay,
option. So no sensitive info. But I show you. So the main use case is that people connect um, people connect the middleware. So we have some middlewares that people integrate in their code base, and the
okay,
middleware would track both outgoing requests. So outgoing is where you have to call a third party. So let's say you have to call Stripe's APIs, for example, and then
okay,
incoming requests for whatever reason is packed with outgoing requests today. Okay, so you can see some incoming. So this is where so I have a to-do list service that is hosted somewhere. That's where this is coming from.
okay,
So people would usually just instrument both the incoming and outgoing, and
okay,
what it does is track. For example, there's nothing in this request, but it's tracking both the request and the responses. Let me find an
okay.
example.
I was gonna say I can read the screen fine, but do you mind bumping it just one more, just because sometimes like when people watch the recording, yeah, no, that's perfect.
Okay, let's do this again. Yeah. So we have this incoming and outgoing requests that
Okay,
are being tracked. And usually you would see, yeah, you can see an example so that it's tracking the request bodies and then the response bodies. And there are many reasons why you would do this,
Okay.
just the tracking bit. For example, if you were using a particular third party, and that third party did something they shouldn't do, it's really good to see exactly what they sent to you,
Okay.
and maybe even have proof to show them that, hey, like, you were supposed to send me these values and you sent me something else.
Okay.
But also, you can, for example, if filter, say, okay, give me all the requests that were failing, for
Okay.
example. Do I have some? So you can, kind of explore, or you can say, give me all the requests by this particular customer, assuming you have that customer somewhere in your response. I
Okay.
don't think I have.
Or like the host, like you were saying, like your to do.
Something like that, yeah. So
Okay.
let's say, give me all the get requests, for example. And then, so this is, you can of course explore. So whatever, that's anyway, this is like just a regular login use case. But the
Okay.
thing that we do special, that we do, that makes it special, is
Okay.
that this request then gets, I bumped it up quite a lot, so now some stuff
Oh
let
yeah,
me
yeah, yeah. It's
wait.
okay.
Yeah, but the things that we do is that those requests that come in now get analyzed to catch breaking changes. So if
Okay.
in any of these APIs, some fields were added, so some new fields were introduced,
Okay.
or some fields were deleted. Thankfully, none was deleted here. Or a field is changed. Let's say this field used to return something,
Okay.
and now it returns something else than what it did before. Then we would usually just detect that issue and then tell you what request, or what, yeah, tell you who was impacted. In this case, it's been a while, and then you can see exactly what changed. So that is kind of the main use case. And of course, for whatever reason, I can't find a good example here. Let me see if I can find an example in this other project. Um, But what I wanted to show you is a scenario where there's an error in the code. So another thing it tracks, other than outside of breaking changes, is just
Okay.
exceptions.
There's no errors. Your
And
code's all perfect, Anthony.
these are like demo, yeah, demo accounts. There's no like
Okay.
real world. If I go to my real world stuff, you would only see errors. Everything that can go wrong would go wrong. But let me see. Maybe I can find like a screenshot or something. Okay, it's okay. Tap on something. Oh, okay, I'll just bring this. This is a good. This is just an example. So usually, if
Okay.
there's like exceptions, that were cut in the code, they would just get
Okay.
just aggregated in a way, the same way we're aggregating like code changes and breaking changes.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that's kind of the core use case actually of the tool.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
because I was gonna say, like you were saying, the logging, that's kind of like a standardish thing. So
yeah,
the debugging and like the changing and stuff, like
yeah,
fields or fields being removed. So no, that's
yeah.
pretty cool.
One stuff that we do, I mean, there's a bunch of things, but uh, for example, we're able to, like I said, we to catch when there's a breaking change in an API, you need to understand what you're analyzing. So
Okay.
we're able to convert that understanding which we have into this Open API Swagger. So this is a demo project. That's why it's a lot of hosts. Let's go back here. Exactly. So we convert that into this Open API Swagger, which is just generated based on that live traffic, right? And then we then kind of aggregate it in a way that it's easy to explore. So if you want to see what are all the different endpoints, what are the different API providers that I use in my system, So at a glance, you can see all the different out external API calls that happen from your system,
Okay.
or all the different host names and domains that you're exposing to your customers. That's the incoming. And if you go in, you would, but maybe I should come from here. But if when you go in, you would then be able to see this kind of just APM, like performance, how slow, how fast is this
Okay.
endpoint, and how often are errors happening, etc. Um,
I guess
so yeah,
a question I have. So like we're looking at the dashboard right now, but say I have an API. Like what steps do I do to go? Like I imagine obviously I've got to install a package of some sorts, and then do I does API
I'm sure.
Toolkit become a middleware in the API, or like
Yeah,
yeah, just curious how it works.
let me just show you quickly actually. So I have a test. I think I have I
This
think
one you'll need to
Node.js.
zoom in a bit.
Oh,
This I definitely
sorry.
can't read. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Let's do this again. I think I have like a Node.js project somewhere here. There should be some Node.js thing. Tests. Okay, yeah, I have this one. So very simple. This is
Okay,
a test key, so if you go there, you get blocked. But in any case, so if I make a request, or let me just delete this and put one. Let's just yeah. So this is an empty project. Let me get an API key. All right.
you're YOLO showing the API keys on the stream, but okay.
Okay, so this is like a very the most basic web service you could implement in any language, and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
API toolkit is this middleware, right?
Okay,
So I mean, there are other things you can do. For example, I can say, or maybe let's look at this example first. So if I test express, so if I execute this and then make a request to this endpoint, so let's say I make a curl request to this, so I get back this hello world, which is
okay,
the hello world here. So that request should then be tracked. And then here in the log explorer, I can see the requests that happened, right? So the hello world request that I just did. So
okay.
pretty basic. Likewise, if within this handler, let's say one of the actions is that we make, let's just say there's an error. So how do I do an error again in Express?
Yeah, you could just
um,
you could just do res dot I think it's is it res dot error, I forget. Uh, you could also just
I
throw,
think
to be
there's an
honest, and it
example.
should give an error.
So let me just go to the docs just because I'm sure there's something in there.
Yeah, you could return like a bad request, but I think if you just throw, you should get a 500.
Hmm. Yes, yes, yes. I think there should be something like that here. Okay, yeah. So I want to report a specific error. So I'll just copy this and paste.
Cool.
So let's say we have this something, something, something. So if I execute this,
I think this will give you a
so something
200
went wrong.
because it's not, you know what I mean? Because it's you threw the error and you caught it, and the
Ah, I see
oh okay,
what you
oh
mean.
no no sorry, never mind, sorry, the API toolkit's got report error. Okay, I see. Yeah.
Yes. So we'll try this report error, but then I could also like throw a general error, but it's okay. This is enough. So we would then, um, so this request that came in, we know that, while we're processing this request, that an error happened, and
Okay.
so I can see the stack trace of that error that happened. So this is the error that happened while processing this request.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, it's like a very small thing in a lot of ways, but ends up being, uh, I'm trying to find, okay, it takes a few minutes before it gets aggregated into an error, but I would show you when that happens. I'm thinking what else to show.
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious
um,
about the middleware. So like obviously you add it to like different languages. You probably have like different middlewares, obviously, or same middleware, but like different language support. So like I guess is there any performance considerations of adding the middleware? And kind of I guess like what is the middleware doing exactly? Like I'm guessing it's just saying like like because you report even when there's a 200, so like I imagine you're always logging something in there to APItoolkit. But yeah,
mhm.
curious just about the middleware.
It's actually something that it gave us a bit of headache in the beginning, because we really spent time thinking about, how can we build this kind of reporting but not impact a regular server.
Yeah.
And we actually have two ways. So we support OpenTelemetry,
Okay.
which is this standard for observability now. So with OpenTelemetry, you can even send regular back your logs in
Okay.
your Kubernetes logs, your any logs, and then the traces. But for this very basic simple use case where we are not even using OpenTelemetry, what it
Okay.
does is that, and it depends on the language, because in some languages you can do some things, in others you can't. But in Node.js, what we're doing is we're actually adding it into a queue
Okay.
asynchronously, and then we're using Google Cloud Pops Up as the transport.
Okay.
So what the Google Cloud pops up what it does is basically, from that queue, it batches and then streams it in a way that does not impact the request where that data came from. In other
Okay.
words, if if you come to my website and do XYZ, all that we're doing is just copying, what happened while you were doing XYZ. We don't even send it during while we're processing that request. We just
Okay.
keep it aside for it to then eventually get sent. you know
Okay.
so there's, of course, there's no like free lunch. If we're doing this kind of stuff asynchronously, then there's a bit of a memory cost, because we're copying this data and then we have to send it. But the memory cost is minimal for most people,
Okay.
except you're doing, I don't know, hundreds of millions of requests a minute. uh, but we store it in this binary only format, and then send it via gRPC. So we try to keep it to this minimum of what the data can be in memory. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. And I guess what was I gonna say in terms of the not the memory, but yeah, I guess in terms of the data, because there can obviously be sensitive data in
Mm.
API requests. Uh, I imagine you have to be diligent about that and like make it very clear to customers that like we're a middleware or like we're a service that like we have the data at some point. Like I imagine that's I'm just
Let me show you
kind of
an
curious about
example.
that piece. Okay.
So let's say this endpoint. And actually, I think I should do it here. So let's say this endpoint sends sensitive data.
Yeah.
So let's assume it's some JSON, CVV, credit card. I don't know. And then in here, there is maybe a CVV,
Okay.
um, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then let's say I have, I don't know, let's say just it's my name.
Okay.
Uh, say Nick. So we have what we let you do is specify the fields that you consider to be sensitive.
Okay.
And so we have a field that redacts. So we have redact headers, we have redact request body, we have redact response body.
Okay.
And this is a list of JSON paths. So you would write
Okay.
something like dollars dot credit card. Of course, I can use a wildcard. I can, for example,
Yeah.
say, don't send any value, send only the keys, just
Okay.
as a JSON path. JSON path lets you describe whatever you like. But I
Okay.
can say, okay, just the CVV is sensitive. So don't send this CVV.
Okay.
And what that would look like is that when a request happens, um, yeah, so this came out as so when the request gets sent here, if I did this correctly, in that response, the CVV is
Okay.
redacted. So
Okay.
what happens is that this is actually redacted on the server. It doesn't even get on the network.
Okay.
So on this device, in this SDK, so if we, it's probably annoying to get into the code, but if we get into the code, actually, so of course, there's a bit of extra CPU cost, right? Because, now we're going to match and remove it on your device, but it's
Yeah.
really minimal. It ends up not even
Yeah.
being worth talking about. But the benefit is that any data that you feel like, is sensitive, you don't want to trust us with, then you can just remove it on your machine and we never get it at all.
Okay. So okay, so just to be clear in my understanding, it's it never like the middleware literally just never sends it to even to API toolkit. Is that what you mean?
No,
Okay.
yes, it never goes anywhere. The middleware just removes, sanitizes the data and removes this.
Okay. Okay, yeah,
Mm.
because I wasn't sure if it was like you get the data in API toolkit and then just in like when you render it, you just say like redact it. So okay, so that's good. I
Mhm.
I guess the other question, because this is not something I've you know, people are very no pun intended, but very sensitive about their data and where it goes and stuff. So
With good reason. I
yeah,
would be
yeah, yeah,
sensitive
no, for
about my
sure.
data
Yeah,
too.
yeah, exactly. But okay, so, but I guess like even if you're not sending the redacted information, for example, you're still sending other information which uh yeah about a user potentially, because like it's honestly up. I guess I'm curious, like where is the boundary of you API Toolkit, the company, where you're kind of, because the middleware is basically like as the name implies, it's a middleman. So in terms of the dat, like I guess curious about like from the business aspect of things, like when you have these discussions with like potential clients or existing clients, like yes, we do redact data that we never get, but we're also still in the middle, you know? So I just kind of curious about that more,
So
but more business standpoint.
it depends at the end of the day. So we have, the irony is, most of our users of API toolkit end up being, we have quite a bunch of fintechs.
Okay.
And why is this the case? It's because for them, the cost of something going wrong ends up being pretty high.
Yeah.
So if a customer says, "Oh, I sent this amount of money and it never got sent," or someone never got it, and they're like, "Yeah, absolutely sent. It's not in your dashboard." Then they need proof. They need to show and say, okay, yeah, he actually sent it. But
Yeah.
these fintechs always also work with other partners. So he sent it, but then we call this partner, and then, okay, this partner, we gave him all this information, but it's this partner's fault. So it ends up being useful to
Okay.
them. So for a lot of these fintechs, especially the much bigger ones,
Hmm.
they feel safer if they host API toolkit on their own infrastructure. So
Okay.
we let that happen. We're actually trying to make API toolkit open source. It's just Right now, a bunch of it, most of it is open source, but not
Okay.
everything yet. It's just, it takes some time to clean things out. But for a lot of
Okay.
them, they just run it on their infrastructure. While for those where, especially the smaller ones, or those who, yeah, I mean, we anyway give a guarantee that the data gets erased after a
Okay.
particular retention period, so they understand that, and for a lot of them, it's also fine.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. Well, that answers one of my other questions I was gonna ask. So like you provide self-hosting as well. So like
Mm.
um so I guess with the self-hosting is like just in terms of like pricing and stuff. So like obviously cloud hosting for a service like this, it removes burden of people having to maintain it. Um,
Mm.
but if you do self-host, is there still a license for that, or is that like kind of like for example, like I know Sentry, for example, they have self-hosting, and I think it's free if you do it yourself. I'm not sure about that though. I gotta double check that, but
So eventually, it will be free for everyone if you do it yourself,
okay,
and that would be, when we are fully open source. So you just take the code and run it. At the moment, most of the companies who do this kind of self-hosting, it's usually, we have a conversation, we're like, "Oh, I want to host it on our infra," and then we
okay,
help them work with their engineering team and just get it set up.
okay,
So that's what usually happens. And yeah, we do there's a cost for that. So it's more we charge just a fixed license per project,
okay.
which is, we charge 250 a month, which works okay for most people, since, for us, we don't have to pay all of the network costs and, storage costs.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so they're pretty much just paying for a license, so it's always good for us as well.
Okay, okay. No,
Yeah.
that's cool to know. Uh, Yeah, no, I have just I created a workspace on OpenSauce. I'm gonna just drop it. This is like the list of, from what I can tell, the projects that uh, exist that are open source. Let me just go and
Mm.
drop this here if folks want to check that out. Um, but yeah, so like yeah, I guess we can show. Let's see here. Like yeah, I see you have like doc tests, API toolkit. There's like
Ah,
JS. There's a I can actually share my screen for a second.
yeah, I can. Are you looking at the GitHub?
Yeah, I was like I brought it all together. Yeah, I was looking at the GitHub. Yeah.
Ah, okay. I can talk about the project.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. Cool.
there's this cool project which I think is really interesting. I didn't show it in action. So a lot of the
Okay.
projects in our GitHub are just the SDKs, right? So they're
Okay. Yeah,
pretty
that's
much
what
all
I
public.
have here.
So this is what
Okay.
we're trying to make open source at the moment. So this
Okay.
is still private, but everything else is open source, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah. Let
these
me
test
switch back to
kits.
your screen. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I see your
Am
screen
I
now.
sharing?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you are. It's
Can you see?
I just shared your screen again. That's all. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So
Oh,
we're on the
okay. Let
GitHub
me
here.
go back. So I was just showing. So this is github.com/APItoolkit. So I was showing the different projects in here. So this is what we're trying to make open source, the server. So
Okay.
this is still private, but everything else is basically, we just try to keep it open. Also, because a lot of it are SDKs, so it doesn't
Yeah.
make any. Even our landing page is open.
Okay.
Um, but the non SDK project that we maintain, which I think is really cool, is Test Kit.
Okay.
And what Test Kit is it's basically an engine for test automation.
Okay.
So how I why I built it was, so right now you can write a lot of tests using Cypress. There's Playwright. There's a lot of these tools, but they usually require you to write some programming language, usually JavaScript. For some,
Yeah.
like rest assured you write Groovy for all. There's just different languages depending on the project, on the
Yeah.
testing library. So TestKit requires you to write the same tests, but using this YAML DSL, right? Which when a lot of people hear this, they get like spidey sense. Oh, why the hell am I gonna write YAML? But I'll show the benefits or why we're doing that. So first of all, I think it reads nicely for even people who are not programmers. So the test below is exactly this same test, this same
Okay.
Cypress test, just written in test kits. And it has a pretty simple syntax, but it's a bunch of perform an operation and then specify a list of assertions,
Okay.
right? And uh, and you can execute this locally in your CI, so you can write a lot of tests and execute it. It works normally. In fact, you can even do browser automation with this. But the real benefit is that since this is a YAML DSL, it's possible to write uh, a user interface on top of this,
Okay.
right? So this maps very simply into a UI, which means you can create like a drag and drop test builder. You can even this is pretty easy for ChatGPT even to generate.
Okay.
And what we're doing is that in API when we process a customer's request, all of these requests that come in here. Um, oh yeah, I was showing you this endpoint. But yeah, so when we process this request, we're able to generate these Open API Swagger specifications. And then we pass this specification into some LLM system. And that LLM then generates, okay, it hasn't generated this yet, but will generate this kind of test, basically this YAML. And I'll show you what it looks like. Let me go into a
Okay.
different project.
I was gonna say, Fuzzy in the chat is not happy that it's YAML. There's definitely a lot of people that don't like YAML. I haven't really done a ton. Well, like we use Pulumi for infrastructure as code,
Infrastructure. Mm.
but yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go on. It's
I hear you. But the ideal, and we are not at that ideal point yet, but the dream I have, like in that test kit project, is that there would come a time where a lot of these tests, these very important tests, can be, we take all of that information we have, pass it through the LLM, it generates this, and you can have a kind of a user experience for exploring exactly what you're doing,
okay.
right? So all of this in APItoolkit. So this is in APItoolkit. You can write all this. You can write this test. Sorry, but it's basically that YAML,
Okay.
right? So I can write it in here, or I can say if I come in here and add another session. Um,
Okay.
you
So
know,
the YAML's not a requirement. Like you can do it in the UI if you wanted to, and then
exactly.
okay. And you
So
could
it's,
have other types of, it doesn't
that's what I
necessarily
mean.
have to be YAML forever. It could be other types, maybe long term.
Yes, and the other benefits of this kind of YAML kind of thing is that I can use this YAML specification to generate that Cypress JavaScript. In fact, I can use this to generate Groovy for rest assured, or pretty much any testing library you can think of. It's easier to generate code, and I mean Pulumi does the same, right? It's easier to
Yeah.
generate code from this than to generate this from code.
Okay. Just because
So
it's
that's
it's
the
it's
whole
easier
idea.
to read, I guess.
You can
Like
pass
when you're
this. You
parsing
can
it.
pass this in 30 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a much more constrained grammar, and it's basically a bunch of key value pairs. It's either a key value pair or it's a list. So it's super simple. But that's basically what
Okay.
this test kit does, and it's also what we
Okay.
use in testing API toolkit at the moment. So
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Lots of interesting stuff here. I know we've got about 15 minutes left here. I don't know if you wanted
Yeah.
to if there's some other stuff you wanted to showcase, or we can definitely go on a tangent if you want. I'm up for anything. So
Let's go on a tangent.
yeah, yeah. I guess
um,
so. Like, how long has the project been in existence? Because I think, is it 2019 you said, or
so 2019 is when I infamously helped helped Delivery Hero lose almost $3 million in
okay,
orders. So it's from that point that I started hacking on this breaking
okay,
change detection algorithm, which is actually pretty fun if people want to see how that works. Oh, I
yeah,
can share my screen again and show it off.
yeah, yeah. Go for it.
Because I found that like this is so simple to do, and yet we have all of these platforms from observability, but no one really is thinking about this. So let's say I have an endpoint.
Okay,
We even have this already. So I have an endpoint gets credit card. All right. And this endpoint, for now, just for simplicity, we'll stick with just this. Um,
okay,
so how can I reduce this data into a form that lets me know? Remember, in real time, in production, we have customers doing millions of requests, every hour.
yeah,
So it's a lot of data. I can't do very complex calculations for every single request coming from all my users. Then I mean, it means I'm paying the hosting cost of all my users combined, right?
yeah,
So I
yeah.
want to take cuts. So let's say I have this endpoint, this single endpoint, and it keeps getting different values. So let's say in example one, it returns this. In another request, it returns Anthony,
Okay,
Anthony, and then this is, I don't know, 14.
we can have
Then
the
let's
same CVV.
maybe. This is not my real CVV for anyone who's trying to.
Yeah, yeah. I've been trying to use your credit card for the past 30 minutes, and it's still rejecting it.
Oh, yeah, thankfully. Please don't try this at home. But let's say in some scenarios, we get not just the CVV, but we also get, let's say, it's the address. For address, I'll just put Germany, just for simplicity. So we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
all of these requests. How do I figure out an understanding, a type that represents this endpoint?
Okay,
Uh, so the first thing we do is we flatten all of these requests. So if I flatten the first request, it looks something like, let's just use this JSON path syntax. So we have credit card.cvv, and this is 1234. The next one is uh, credit card dot name, and this is Nick.
okay.
So if I flatten this other one, it's gonna look the same, but this would be 14, and then this would be Anthony.
Hmm.
And if I flatten this one, it's going to be basically the same thing, but with one extra field. So we're gonna have so this would be address Germany. Okay, so
Yeah,
this is all flattened. So basically, this is a representation of this, right? So
yeah.
for all intents and purposes, I can delete this for now. Yes. So this is an example of everything that goes through this endpoint. In practice, this would be like millions of requests. So if
Yeah.
I could say uh, that this endpoint has two shapes. The first shape is that it could be either a dollars credit card dot cvv
Yeah.
and a dollars credit card dot name, maybe sorted. This is the same shape. And then the next shape is that it could also have an additional field,
Mhm.
credit card dot address. So now this has two shapes. So I can take these two and just hash it. Is there a good hash online? Hash online. Is there an XX hash? That's usually just shortest. I want a very short hash.
So this is just doing a content hash, I guess.
Yeah. For now, I'm ignoring the values and just doing the keys.
Okay.
So let's use this one. So with this example, so this is the first. So if I hash this first, I get
Oh yeah,
this.
sorry, just the keys, like you said. Yeah, yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Mhm. And if I do this, if I take all of this and hash it, I should get a new value.
Yeah.
Right. So now we have a different hash. So what APItoolkit is doing is, so there are many levels. There are many things we're doing, but level one is what are the different shapes of these endpoints?
Okay.
So when every request that comes in, we take the keys and then we hash it like this and get the hash. Usually something better. And then eventually, and we're maintaining a list of all the different shapes, the different hashes. So
Hmm.
eventually something new like this is going to come around. And when we look it up in our system, we would find that, okay, this hash is not in our database. This is not
Okay.
something we've seen for this particular endpoint so far.
Okay.
Then we can now do our actual, interesting logic, So we don't need to do for all of this. We can basically just store the request and not do anything special. But when we now encounter a new request with a new hash, then we now say, okay, this is new.
Yeah.
So first things first, we send a notification to the team and say, hey, like we notice well, of course now that we know that it's a different hash, we try to find, okay, what is unique here. In that
Yeah, yeah.
case, this is what is unique. So we now send an email and say, hey, in this endpoint we notice a new field address. Was that intended? But let's say we had a scenario where you know this happened but name was missing. It will also be a different hash, just and then we'll say, we noticed that name is always it's basically an important part of all your endpoints. It's missing in this example. Was this your intention? So
Okay.
if the team says, yes, this was my intention, then we'll basically adopt it as a new shape and say, okay, now this endpoint, this service has all
Okay.
of this possible body, this possible structure. But if it's not, then we know that that was an issue. So that's the level one. So that lets us know when there is a field was deleted, a field was removed, all of that.
Yeah.
But we also do the same thing for these values. So we have some heuristics where we're applying on all of this,
Okay.
and this will tell us that this 1, 2, 3. I mean, usually we compare it, but with this and this and this would tell us that we have a range between 14 to 1, 2, 3, 4. So every time a new request comes, we're using that to improve our understanding. In this case, we don't notify every time there's a new change, but we're just gradually improving. You can think of it like this: we're trying to find our logic is basically trying to find the most general regex that
Okay.
represents that value. That's basically what we're doing. So that general regex. So every time something comes, we're matching it against that regex. If it doesn't match, then we now do some logic to try to find, okay, it didn't match, but is it still within, is it still a plausible response? And there are
Okay.
times where it's not plausible. For example, if this was a UUID, which had this shape, something, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden we get Nick. We compare and say, yeah, this shape is really more like a UUID. There's no reason why a UUID and a name should be sharing
Okay.
the same field. Then we notify you and tell you here, like, there's something weird going on here. So that's
Okay.
basically, the core of what we're doing, trying to help you narrow down any breaking changes and any special stuff.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and that goes back to the the UI you were showing at the beginning, where you said there was changes like that. That's what this maps
Hmm.
to, right? Okay.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you can
Okay.
think of it as, imagine if this was a type. So it's like
Yeah,
building
I
a
was gonna say
type
this comes back
now.
to types. Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, okay, we have this field. This field is a string, and we have that. I can actually show you. So if I go into any of the endpoints, let's say I go in here and I go in here. So if I go into API docs, so you see we even have the list of ships that we're tracking.
Okay.
But if I go in here, you see the different fields, and if I click on any of them, yeah, you can see we have a concept of a type, and then we have a concept of a format. They seem like the same in this example. I have to spend some time to find a better example. But assuming this
Okay.
was a date or something special, we'll tell you, okay, the type is ABC, is a string, but the format is exactly this kind of date. So we'll tell you this is year, year,
Okay.
year, month, month, day, day. And so if that
Okay.
format is different, then maybe something is
Okay. And
wrong, it's a bug.
yeah, and this could help with error detection too. Like obviously, like say the API was expecting a UTC date and Nick got passed, like you were saying, it should end up being a bad request, or like or a 500.
Well, I have a war story from a team that I can even tell you. So they were using a library. There's this library in Go,
Okay.
and that in Go, if you want to convert between time formats, it's a bit stressful. You need to you need to write a string like 2006. That's something. The exact format, but on a particular day. Uh, I'm probably rambling. I'm probably, but casting, formatting a date in Go, it's like that. So there are libraries that, yes. So you have to write this format. You have to say time.format, and then you give it something like this. Maybe if I open this, this
Okay.
is simpler. Yes. So you say time.format, and then you give it this, and then it's going to return these dates. So the same thing when you're passing. So when you're passing a date format, you also have to give it what you're passing it as.
Hmm.
But there are libraries that try to use some heuristic for this. I have to remember the
Okay.
name of that library. And what they do is that they have a list that they match against. So instead of the library caller giving it this format, you just
Hmm.
give the library the date you want to pass, and it matches it against like a list of date formats.
Okay.
A list like this to try to find what is the format that represents whatever time string you gave to me. Right. So a user of APItoolkit was actually using a library like this.
Okay.
Um, and the original implementation of the library defaulted to trying the US time format. So I think there's something like month, month, day, day, year, 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 right? So to try to pass this by default. And
Okay.
in this GitHub project, there was like a conversation for like, I don't know, for a couple years with people being pissed that they are defaulting to the US date format first.
Okay.
And eventually the author of the library caved in and decided to change it so that the default it matches with would be day, day, year,
Okay.
month, month, yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. I see where things went sideways. Okay.
Yeah. And he was like, I mean, he announced, they did a deprecation notice, they announced this thing for like 6 months. But obviously, no one really reads all the GitHub issues in every library they use, especially not a time library. So these guys, obviously, no one knew. So you can imagine what happens when you run go get dash u in your terminal one day. You're working on some other task
Yeah.
unrelated to dates, and you run go get updates, and now you have the latest version of this library, and now your date passing is all broken.
Everything's wrong unless it's January 1st.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and this is one of the, so at the time we we didn't have this feature. So But this is one of the use cases that now, if you have
Okay.
something like this, would immediately tell you, hey, like this
Okay.
date format is not valid for what you were doing before. But yeah.
Cool. Cool. Awesome. No, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap things up. Um, I'll just switch us back to chatting view. Um, no, this is super cool. Thanks so much, Anthony, for taking the time. I know it's a little later. You're in Germany. I guess it's not too late. It's what,
Yeah,
4 p.m., 5 p.m.
it's not too late. Yeah.
Cool, cool.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
5
but no,
6
this is
p.m.
super
actually.
cool, and I, I enjoyed that little breakdown of doing the diffing and finding, like the hashing there. That does seem like a
Mm,
unique part of the tool. So um, I did drop a link to where people can give you a follow with all the places you shared with me. I'm also going to drop a link to
thanks,
API
Nick.
Toolkit again. And yeah, I guess just before we wrap up, anything else you wanted to mention? I had a great time. Love chatting with you today.
Likewise, Nick. So thanks. I mean, I really appreciate you having me today. It was really fun. Um, Maybe only thing I could shout out to people is I showed off test kit. I know a lot of you hate it, but
Okay,
still,
cool.
go give it a try.
Yeah, yeah,
It's open. I mean, it's still open source project on GitHub, and then you can tell me what you hate about it, and we can fight it out.
cool, cool. And Fuzzy in the chat who said no to YAML. He said great stream and great product. So I think you might have a potential convert or at least somebody interested. So cool, cool.
Thanks,
All right.
man.
Well, with that, folks,
Thanks, Fuzzy.
thanks again, everybody, for hanging today. And we'll be back on next Wednesday. I'm going to be hanging with Pelly from Microsoft. We're going to be looking at a project called Gen AI Toolkit. So pretty excited for that. I'll drop the schedule if folks want to check that out. And thanks again, Anthony. And if you don't mind just staying on for 1 second, and everybody else, we'll see you in the next one.